Hello and welcome to the Armchair QBs. I'm your host Calum Buchan. Alongside me is Dan Cameron. A special guest with us for this AFC West and NFC West preview, Cameron Hobbs from NFL Scotland.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you, Cameron?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Looking forward to getting some NFL back into our lives very soon, hopefully.
Well, yeah, it looks like that could be filling our Saturdays, as it looks like the college football world is completely falling apart. We've just had news that the Big Ten and Pac-12 are no longer going to be taking part this year. Although there was talk of Nebraska going rogue and joining some other conference if football is still out there, which should be fun. DC, what's your thoughts on this? As our
I don't understand how they've got themselves into this position. And the main thing was when it started filtering out about maybe 2 days ago was that this seemed like a PR strategy. It was a soft leak to try and get all the reaction out, hear all the arguments, and then be able to come up with something. Because first, when it was leaked out, it was that it was being fully cancelled. And then it was Kirk Herbstreit, of all people, suddenly got wind that actually, no, it wasn't being cancelled. It was maybe just being postponed till November, and now they've pushed it until the fall. So when it first got leaked out, it was quite clear that they were trying to gauge public interest and try and figure out the best way to approach it, because they were going to not start in the usual time. But to push it into the spring brings its own logistical problems. Now a lot of players, even despite signing up to this hashtag we want to play, they may have wanted to play in the fall. I don't know if they want to play in the spring, if it means that it's going to hamper their ability to get millions of dollars and be signed in the early rounds of the draft. So it's not finished yet, and so the next week will be very important to see how it's going to go through. But at least Florida will have a chance to actually win something this year. And the ACC, because the winner of the championship is going to come from either the SEC or the ACC.
I mean, that was a low blow. There was no need for that. It's a very good program.
No, it's not. It's not.
We just need a coach with low morals. That's all we need. Dan Mullen's not the right fit for us. We need to start bringing back the injury boot, or the suspension boot, as it used to be. Cameron, how do you think this will have an impact if there is no football to the NFL? Because obviously this could have a knock-on effect for the draft.
Massive impact. And I think that, this is where you potentially go into the draft next year basing it on the stock of the players from last year. And then there's a long time between those players actually having played a competitive game and actually going into the NFL. This is even assuming that we get round to any kind of normality by this time next year. Because if you look at the way the training camps have worked this year, is obviously a load of the rookies haven't had the same amount of time to spend together in the facilities with the teams, learning the playbooks, spending time with their coaches, doing all the things that they're going to benefit from face-to-face. I'm sure loads of stuff's been done online. You've also got in situations now where The Rock has bought the XFL. And already there's people saying on Twitter, what a great opportunity for them to now jump in, because if they can turn around and have a spring league, maybe the college players would rather go and sign in the XFL and at least get paid. So at least get paid to play in the spring for the XFL and play for that opportunity to get into the NFL that route, rather than necessarily go into a college program that's going to try and push them to do that in the spring. Even then, you do look at the advantages that some of those players are going to have over each other. And then you get someone like a Trevor Lawrence. So does Trevor Lawrence decide to sit? He thinks he's done enough. He doesn't need to prove it himself anymore. The hype's there 100%. He's still got more learning to do. But I'm sure he would rather do that and sit for a year in the NFL and get paid than risk doing it for college and risk his career. You look at the rise and fall of Joe Burrow and Tua over that last year that they had in college. Now, Tua didn't drop that far, but obviously comes into the season injured. We don't know when he's going to start, whereas go back 12 months before, it was all about tanking for Tua. Joe Burrow was the opposite, was on, a decent quarterback, a good quarterback, but God, nobody saw the season that he was going to have with LSU and ended up going number one overall. So it's going to have massive impact. It's not even going to have massive impact, I don't think, on just this year's draft. It's going to impact the draft for years to come, because you've got players now who in a couple of years' time are going to make a decision to go, well, hang on, I missed out on a whole year of football. Do I now extend this and stay and do another year, or do I come out early with less experience, take the risk and roll the dice and prove myself at the NFL? I wonder what we'll see done to compensate for this. I wonder if there's anything that the NFL are looking about expanding roster sizes slightly to allow more players to go in and kind of prove themselves, encourage teams to not cut as many players and things like that. I'm sure these conversations are being done and they're being proactive. But, going back to Dan's point originally, it's just such a shame that we've kind of got into this mess at all. It feels like there's been a lack of preparation. This isn't new. This has been happening since February. It really became a major issue in March. And you look at the situation that they had in New York. That's a long time to try and figure out how this was going to work. Much like with the NFL stuff, it just doesn't feel like the time's not been put in with the right level of investment. There's almost been this will go away. We'll be fine. Let's not invest too much in this because it'll go away. It won't be a problem. And it is a problem. And it's going to be a catastrophic problem if it means we're not going to have any football at all.
And I think the main person this is going to affect is, from the scenario that Cameron's just mentioned there, is Justin Fields. In the end, he's only going to have one real year of college football to be able to project the NFL. And despite Mr. Trubisky being taken with the second overall pick, this is a completely different situation. And how is the next year going to really affect him? And cooperation only lasts as long as the status quo is unchanged, and the whole landscape of football and the kind of system they have is being upheaved this year, and it could have long-lasting consequences.
I think Cameron made a really good point there about people maybe staying in later, like staying in for another year. I think you're going to see that with like the third round and like third to fourth round guys. And certainly the later draft picks, if they still have a year of eligibility, I think they take it. It's still to be decided if this rolls over as a year of eligibility and they don't count it. I have heard about the XFL argument, but I think that would hurt other people. I think that would hurt players' draft stock because you're not going to be going up against just college players. You're going to be going up against like grown men who have washed out of the NFL and who are looking to prove themselves. So although it would be nice to go into the XFL, I think it's still a bit of a stretch, and you still have that same problem of like, when are the NFL going to hold the draft? Traditionally that's in April. So when do you get this game going? Because it's just a very messy, complicated situation. And I can't really see a way out of it because the NCAA there's not one central decision maker there. You've got the Power 5 conferences, then you've got all the lesser conferences with their own heads who are all trying to make these decisions, and it just leads itself to being a mess.
Yeah, but the main difficulty is that they're all governed by NCAA rules and sanctions, and the way that players are treated, not as employees, and then you get into very complicated issues of labor law in America. And that's what I'm saying. The cooperation between all these different entities existed as long as there was a beneficial system for them all, and that's falling apart at the moment. In relation to the XFL, it's been bought by a very high profile figure. I don't think it's going to be a risk reward consideration for them whether or not that they can fill a void. But if they're going to try and start up in the spring, they might be competing with whatever college football might exist at that point. And I think they might just want to step back and make sure that when they do launch themselves, they are the only focus for the public, the only focus for the media, and that nothing takes away from the kind of rebranding, relaunch, and the reorganization of it. So there's lots of moving parts at the moment, and it's very fluid and dynamic, and I think we won't actually know what's happening for a little time yet. I don't think it's going to come together quickly at all.
Last point on the XFL, I think that might be different under the Rocks guys and the experience that he's had. I don't know how heavily involved he's going to be, but obviously his story was one of he just didn't get that opportunity out of college. He didn't get that chance to get into the NFL. He seems to be playing this already as more of an extra chance for the guys that didn't quite make it straight to the NFL to have somewhere to play and get good and earn their chance. That will only work well if he does it in conjunction with college football and NFL. Vince, when he set up the XFL, it felt like a bit of I don't want to get political on this at all, but it felt like a bit of a, we're going to make our players stand for the national anthem and all this kind of stuff. That's what it started. It moved on from that, and that kind of went away. But the XFL was traditionally quite provocative against the NFL. If the XFL wants to be a success, it needs to be that middle tier. It needs to be something that's in between, and it needs to work with college football and the NFL. And therefore, I think that's the one consideration, is if they're going to do anything next year and try and set up quickly to do something, they need to do it with respect to the other football leagues around them and not just piss everybody off, because I don't think they'll last if they do that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch. We'll see how this develops over the coming weeks, and certainly the coming days. So let's segue on and move on to why we're here, projecting what we think will happen for this year for the AFC and NFC West. We covered the AFC and NFC North last week. I think just for starters, I'll just go through the Super Bowl odds for each team that we've got here. Chiefs are obviously the favourite, 6-1. 49ers are 8-1. Seahawks 20-1. Raiders 55-1. Broncos 40-1. Chargers 30-1. Rams 30-1, and Cardinals 33-1. Is there anything that jumps out there for you guys?
I think it's going to be Kansas City versus the field at the moment, and I will take the field.
I think the two that stand out to me as interesting odds are the Seahawks being as far out as 20-1. I think, and we'll get into the detail of it, I think with Russell Wilson, they're always a contender. And the way that they play and the fact that they've got such a strong home field advantage, that means that they are always likely to make it into that postseason for me. And therefore, if you can do that bit, then you've got a damn good chance. And I think if they get a good run of form at home, win a couple of games away, and whoever gets the Super Bowl has to go through Seattle, I think those odds are long. The Cardinals being a more outside chance than the Rams for me is a surprise as well. I think that fine, you've got question marks over Kyler Murray, and going into his second year, what can he do? I think he showed enough to show that he's going to be an exciting quarterback, and he's going to be a player that will take the Cardinals' places. And then you just need to look at all the pieces they've added in there. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins coming in is just unreal. So for them to be a further, longer odds than the Rams, for me, is one that I would question right away. I would absolutely flip that round, and I would be putting the Cardinals around the same space as the Seahawks. And again, we'll probably get into this in a bit more detail, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the only reason maybe to knock the Cardinals behind the Rams is maybe questions over Kingsbury. Although I think we did the Kingsbury episode, and it looked like he had evolved over the season to incorporate more and more NFL concepts. So I can see it. Possibly you move them further out just because of coaching. But I think the Chargers at 30-1 is strange. I would have them at bigger odds than the Cardinals, but we'll go on to that as we go into the episode. So let's start off with the AFC West. Last year, obviously Kansas City won the division, finishing 12-4. They won the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl MVP, undeserved Super Bowl MVP, in my opinion. But that was just because I had someone else down. The Broncos finished 7-9. The Las Vegas Raiders finished 7-9, and the Los Angeles Chargers propped up the division 5-11. Let's start off with the Chiefs. Do we see them winning this division again?
Until anyone shows anything otherwise, I think you have to go with the Chiefs as the winners of the division. Since 2015, they're, I think, 27-3 in the division. So until another team can beat them in Arrowhead, I'm going to have to say that the Chiefs, given the way that they've taken care of their skill, talent, and then taking care of Chris Jones immediately a week after I said that they would struggle to sign him. They've done well, and they've solidified, and they've got the most consistency, I think, in the whole division. So it's going to be difficult to see the Chiefs doing falling apart with Patrick Mahomes at the helm and Andy Reid behind him.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that as well. I think that this is the perfect storm of it being the Chiefs are definitely the top two best teams in the NFL. I think that there's two teams at the top of that are clear leaders. And then you look at the rest of the division. And actually, I think the best challenge comes from Denver, but I don't think it's ready to be a challenge yet. I think that Denver's maybe a year or two away from actually mounting any kind of serious challenge to the Chiefs. And I think that they've got to take this year and grow. They've got a lot of exciting pieces in place there. They appear to be following the 49er committee of three running backs because they've got three absolute stellar running backs there, but they are also focusing on giving Drew Lock some weapons as well. And I think that he showed flashes of, what he's capable of. I think that it's so hard when you see these quarterbacks going into teams that haven't been doing very well, in divisions where the opposition isn't necessarily the hardest. It's hard to judge them. I think this is where Drew Lock now, it's his team. We need to see what he comes out and does this year. It's a big year for him. Obviously, there's that whole sophomore slump thing to tackle. But if he can get through this with a bit of progress, I think year 3, you're starting to be an outside contender. And then year 4 is when you really want to start showing that you're capable of making a run and going quite far into the postseason. Until that time, and even then, they've still got to tackle Mahomes because he's going to be in that division for forever. As long as Mahomes is in Kansas, there's a factor there that is out with their control. No matter how good you are, you need to be able to deal with Patrick Mahomes. And you just look to the Super Bowl. And yeah, I totally take the point about Mahomes being MVP. It's the easy option for the Super Bowl. Give it to the quarterback. Certainly first half performance, he was harried, he was hustled, he was under attack, and he didn't have a lot of options. He's got the weapons, he's got the brain, he's got the capability. He is an exciting quarterback that we're going to be drooling over unless you hate the Chiefs for a long time to come. So it's going to be a one-sided division, I think, for the next few years for sure.
I think with the Chiefs, I don't know what the other teams around them have done on the defensive side to get better. I think that's my big question. Like, where have the moves been to neutralise the Chiefs in some ways? Because you need to find somebody to take care of Kelsey. You need to have good corners to take care of like the wide receivers that they have. I don't think. I mean, potentially you need to get a better edge rusher for Mahomes. There's so many weapons there that you need to take care of. But it seems like Denver were focusing on the offense because if you look at Drew Lock's next gen stats, over 20 plus yards, he was way below average distributing the ball like outside the hashes. Drew Lock needs to make some progress, definitely. But it's just how the rest of the teams get better, and I don't think any have to contend with the Chiefs. I think on the Chiefs as well, you have to look at the fact that they have, in terms of if you look at their opponents' total efficiency from last year, which comprises of offense, defense, and special teams, they have the easiest schedule in the NFL this year. It's kind of hard to say like what's really going to derail them and stop them from maybe getting to that 12-4 again or surpassing it.
What a lovely gift for winning the Super Bowl. Here you go, guys. Here's an easy schedule for you next year. Don't say we're not good to you.
I mean, they have got I believe they start with the Texans, which is a bit of a gift. Yeah. And then their out of conference game is the Patriots. The Patriots are decimated, obviously, from all these COVID pullouts. So really, when I'm looking at this, the only tough challenges they have is Baltimore in week 3, Patriots week 4, Bills week 6, Buccaneers week 12, and Saints week 15. So I can see them doing better than 14 wins. DC, what about you?
I think you're insane. I think you've rattled off a number of teams that, when Mahomes is off his game, the Chiefs just don't function, and they're all going to be gunning for the Chiefs. And to say that they're going to get over 14 wins, I think, is one of the boldest, hottest, stinkier takes that you've had for a long period of time.
I just like the Patriots aren't the same though.
The other four teams that you mentioned can give the Chiefs a game, but within the division, this is a cheeky little division. I mean, I've said about 5 minutes ago that everyone's chasing the Chiefs, and I can't see anyone taking it from them because they've only been beaten 3 times in the division since 2015. But the other teams, they're not just kind of going along with it. They, to me, Raiders and the Broncos especially have taken the challenge up, and they have addressed what they needed to. For the Raiders, it's been the defensive side of the ball. They've gone heavy on defensive personnel. The only problem is that they have 2 young corners. Obviously, one of the first-round picks, Arnett, and then they've got Mullen on the other side, who's only in his 2nd or 3rd year. And thereafter, the Broncos have got heavily focused on the offense. What you're saying about Drew Lock is pretty short. Small sample size is what I would say in relation to that. But Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, and Albert O. Now, normally I tell you how to pronounce people's names, but I'm not even going to have a go at that guy, the tight end from Missouri that they drafted in the 4th, 5th round, Albert O. So they have totally gone after the offense and given everything for Drew Lock to be successful. And so I think it's going to be one of these interesting divisions to watch. And it all depends. Can they win in their own stadiums, even without fans, if home field advantage is going to exist in this year? So I think those are the main points, and those are the main contenders. And until we see what Herbert is for the Chargers, I think it's going to be a really interesting division to see how that kind of 2nd, 3rd spot goes, and whether or not the Chiefs can. I'm not saying that they're not going to win. I'm not saying they're not going to do well, but to say that they're going to win over 14 games, I think, is a real stretch.
I think I would bet the over on 14. That's my prop bet for this one. So I do like what the Raiders have done since Gruden came in, and I think they are going on a steady build, but I think they'll still be held back by Carr. That's my only concern with them.
Yeah, the Raiders, their whole setup is that they're incredibly efficient, but just unfortunately at a lower level than anybody else. I mean, I think Carr was throwing around about 70%, but he was essentially the new age Joe Flacco by dumping it down for a kind of 5-yard stick, flat, swing, whatever. He was check down Charlie last year. So they're going to ask him to push it down the field. He or his brothers got busted on Twitter last week for essentially having a burner account and constantly questioning all the criticism about Carr, which didn't help when he said that he was being tired of being disrespected. So go show it. Mr. Carr. He has the ability, and he had that run when Del Rio was the head coach, which took them into the playoffs, and he broke his leg, and unfortunately that kind of fell apart. But if you look at that quarterback from that playoff run and the Carr of last year, they're 2 different styles of quarterback to me, and so you have to get those together. Put those hands together, and then you'll have something really, really interesting. So I'm always a fan of Gruden. I think he'll do well. But it's one of these things that it was still to see it from Derek Carr pushing the ball down the field.
I mean, 6 of their 7 wins last year were won by 7 points or less.
It's just that we talked about last week. It's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, I just think if you see that, sometimes there might be a bit of luck involved in some of those wins. So it's is my only question. Cameron, what have you thought of the Raiders since Gruden's coming back in?
So I thought they made some progress last year. I was down at the game against the Bears at Tottenham, and I don't think anybody gave them a hope in hell of winning that. But they did what they needed to do, and the Bears just didn't. The Bears were jet lagged, right? For me, that's as simple as that. The Bears screwed up their travel plans big time. They didn't consider it fully. They were jet lagged. They were off their game, and the Raiders made the most of that. What I don't really understand with the Raiders is, if you look down their depth chart, and this is a really harsh comment, but I'm standing by it. It is bereft of talent. It is bereft of A-star talent. There is a lot of names on there that you recognise. There are not a lot of names on there that you immediately think, God, he's a player. You know, the depth at wide receiver is poor. They've brought in Henry Ruggs. Let's see what he's going to do. But Terrell Williams, Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones, Nelson Aguilar, these are not wide receivers that you are needing to be able to go up there and get the ball all the time. Obviously, Josh Jacobs was a good addition at running back. Darren Waller had one hell of a season last year. Sometimes, though, I think that's an output of there being nobody else that can go and get the ball. He had the height, he had the strength, so he was the target man. He was basically playing almost like wide receiver one at times. You look on the other side of the ball, and you just, I don't know, there's just not a lot there to get you excited. And actually, if you're looking for a team that's going to benefit the most out of crowds not being in stadiums, it's actually the Raiders. They've just moved home. And I don't think they want to get fans in year one to the stadium, because I think they're just going to be disappointed. I think that it's going to be exactly like you say, scraped wins. This is what the Raiders need to do. They need to just keep themselves in the game and then sneak something. And the thing for me when I look at this is their cap space is depressing as well. You know, they're at the bottom end of the table. There seems to be hardly any cap space. You look at this list of players and I'm like, where the hell are they spending their money? Because they are chucking it down a drain for the most part. I think this is one of the franchises that needs a complete reboot. Their move to Vegas might well give them the opportunity to do it. That's why I think that you've got a big contract there with a head coach, and I think he's going to need every single inch of that to turn this franchise around.
Do we think that we see Mariota start for the Raiders at some point?
I'm not even convinced Derek Carr. I'm slightly higher on Derek Carr than a lot of people are, but I'm not going to go and say I'm high on Derek Carr, right? There's a difference. I genuinely think he's not got the pieces around him to do anything. And I think that you can put the best, with the exception of Aaron Rodgers, because I reckon you could put him into any team and he'd somehow manage to get them to progress. I'm not sure that Mariota is going to come in and do anything different. I don't think Mariota's arm or vision is any greater that's going to change the way this team plays. I think with Mariota, you need a solid backfield. And I think you need more than just Josh Jacobs. If Mariota does come in, I think he may, because I think that's the sort of thing that they'll do if they're not playing well. But I'm not sure that he'll make any difference.
Dan, do you think Mariota gets in?
The one thing that would maybe make me a little bit more inclined to say yes was if there'd been a preseason and we'd seen, you know, how Mariota was doing inside Gruden's system, how he was picking it up, whether or not he was pushing the ball down the field more. I'm higher on the Raiders. I think their defensive struggles were more the issue rather than anything else. They were at 7 wins. I think it's all about the first quarter of the season and how everyone turns on Carr. If Carr's performing well, that's, you know, a given he's going to stay in. But if he's performing at the level that he was last year and they're just scraping by games or they're maybe losing a close game, I can see maybe after the bye, their current win totals around about 7.5. Put my neck out and say that they're over 8.5. I think they might get 9 wins.
I'm just so unsure with the rest of this division and like how it will pan out. I think the Chargers are probably going to prop up the division again, and then it's just between the Raiders and Broncos and whether or not they flip. Like, do we think a second tier? Do we think the runner-up from this division makes it into the playoffs?
They've got the extra spot now, so I think it's possible, given the way that the other divisions are planning out. But I think this is a really, really interesting division. It's almost annoying that the Chiefs are in it because, along with the AFC East, now that the Patriots have been decimated, it's probably going to be one of the more competitive. And I think that they will take wins off each other. So I think the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Broncos will all probably split their games. And thereafter it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. So I think it's really, really tight. And again, I think 9 wins could probably get you in on the extra spot of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the Titans got into the wild card 9-7 last year, and the Bills were 10-6 for the other wild card spot. Cameron, what's your gut telling you on this?
I'm genuinely flabbergasted at Dan's 9 wins. I'm looking through the schedule and I'm trying to add up to 9 and I'm struggling. It's bold, so I'm not getting the challenge. I do think that, based on the expanded postseason, I do think whoever finishes second will get into that wild card extra slot. But to be honest, I think they'll be the extra team. I don't think there's going to be a strong enough contender throughout the season to be a clear, under the old rules, the answer would be no. Under the new rules, I think the answer will be yes, basically. I think, for me, I think it's the Broncos. I think that the Broncos are the team that have got the best talent on both sides of the ball to be able to put together a run. If I've got the Broncos up against the Raiders, I see the Broncos winning both. Depending on what happens with Herbert, if it's Tyrod Taylor, I've got the Broncos winning both against the Chargers as well. I think even the fact that the Broncos have got Melvin Gordon now means that there's that insider knowledge. I don't know how much that comes into play with these things, but I think that the Broncos are starting to build something here, and I think they're further down the path of building than the Raiders are. I think they've just got more pieces in there to succeed. I think the Raiders will be top 5 picks in the 2021 draft.
Okay.
I've got.
So you think Raiders below the Chargers then?
I think Raiders finish bottom in this division. So I've got Raiders bottom, Chargers above them, Broncos above in second, and then Chiefs out in front. I'm not sure that they get over 14 wins. I think all of their hard games are on the road. If you look at all the tough games that they've got to play, they are all away from home. And I think that's a big factor. So, whether the Ravens, the Bills, the Saints, and the Bucks are all tough games and they're all away. So there's potentially 4 defeats. But
I would agree with you, but I don't think that there's going to be any fans. So I think that takes away the Saints' slight advantage. Like Drew Brees last year, pushing the ball down the field, he was not the same player as he once was. Bills, I think we need to see what Josh Allen is. I think there's big question marks on him. Patriots is at home, and again they're decimated on the defensive side of the ball, which is against the Chiefs is probably the worst situation to be in. I think the Ravens could beat them. So I think what we're saying for a recap is that we think the Chiefs will win it, and then it's really just a flip up between Denver and Oakland. Cameron, but you're kind of leaning more towards Oakland being the bottom feeders this year.
Yep.
I'll also just go over quickly before we move on to the NFC West, the MVP bets for each team. So Mahomes is 7-2. I think he has a really good chance of winning or reclaiming the MVP from Lamar. Tyrod Taylor is 125-1. Derek Carr is 80-1, and Drew Lock is 80-1. I wouldn't touch any of those other than Mahomes. Any thoughts or any outside bets that you like for this division?
So I guess the conversation that you're going to have then is, because you're right, you don't touch anyone apart from Mahomes. So the conversation is, let's assume Mahomes breaks himself and he only plays 2 games. And even then, there's still a chance he might win it. For me, it's one of the 2, MVP is not really going to end up being a defensive player, but Joey Bosa, on his big fat contract, is probably the player who can make the biggest impact on the defensive side of things. And I think for me, if you look at the defense, that's why I have the Chargers above the Raiders in the standings. I think that on an offensive way, if you're taking Mahomes out of it, I'll go against slightly what I said about the Raiders, and I think that Josh Joseph is probably the player that could be the most explosive. But I think if you're looking at quarterback, then you're probably looking at Drew Lock being your best chance of it being somebody else. But even then, they're punts. They're absolute punts, every single one of them. It's going to be Mahomes. And even then, if Mahomes doesn't injure himself, it'd probably be Kelsey or something like that. He just steps in and does something monstrous with whichever quarterback comes in to replace Mahomes. So, yeah, it's a bit of a non-conversation in that sense. So you got to go with the scenario planning on that one.
I mean, you can get Josh Jacobs to win the rushing title at 16-1, but I think he's unlikely to win that because how many games are the Raiders going to be losing where they have to turn to passing the ball to try and catch up? So that probably takes him out a little bit. It's the same way I wouldn't look at Christian McCaffrey for it, who's 10-1. I just don't think they'll lean on the run that much once they get down.
We haven't really talked about the Chargers, or did you talk about the Chargers when I was out?
No, we've kind of glossed them over because just like Los Angeles, we're not that bothered by them. Transitioning over to the NFC West. Last year, San Francisco led the division, finishing 13-3, got to the Super Bowl. Seattle were 11-5, got in through the wild card, and then got knocked out of the divisional round by Green Bay. Then you had the Rams at 9-7, and the Cardinals at propping up the division 5-10, and their only draw coming against Detroit, shamefully, and Matt Patricia's pencil. So let's start off with 49ers. They've kind of stayed pat, really. Do we think they can get back to the mountaintop? It is incredibly hard to get back to the Super Bowl when you've lost it.
I didn't think for a second last year, as a Niners fan, that we had any possible chance of getting to the Super Bowl. Like, if you told me at the start of the season that we would make it to the Super Bowl, I'd be leading in the third quarter and end up losing, I would be like, do you know, I'd take that. In hindsight, you're like, God damn it. But it was an absolutely unreal year. It was absolutely unreal. You know, questions the whole time about Jimmy Garoppolo, and valid questions, I think, because there was some games where he was on form and there was some games where he wasn't. I think that you look at the pieces that have moved on, and I think for the most part, we've replaced everything. The big gap for me that remains the question is Emmanuel Sanders. And he wasn't even there at the start of the season. We went out and traded for him because it was a need. It was a definite need. We were fortunate that we came up against some teams that were not playing particularly well last year. The schedule wasn't the hardest in the early part. And we won the games that we needed to win to get the progress. Sanders came in, and Sanders added a bit of, you know, experience, that veteran wide receiver who was good at what he did, and a positive impact on the changing room. And I was sad to see him go to New Orleans, because actually I think he's exactly the missing piece that the Saints need to step up a level this year. Obviously, you know, we can just remember that the officials will screw the Saints in the postseason anyway, and we're all here to see it. So keep it coming, lads. But they've brought in Javon Kinlaw, who I think is an exciting player. Losing DeForest Buckner was a big loss. He was massive player last year, and I think that he is hard to replace. You know, we obviously could only get one off Armstead or Buckner, and I think that obviously they wanted Armstead. I don't think necessarily the better player, but I think at the position it was the better option to go for. Probably doesn't cost as much either. So comfortable with that. Obviously, Joe Staley's away, which is a big loss, but we did the exact right thing. And I think that, you know, with one hand, he's retiring, but on the other hand, here's Trent Williams. So brilliant. A big, nasty lineman that we need that can come in and noise things up. And with the type of game that we're going to play, if we're going to continue to just get Jimmy to dump it off, if we're going to get creative, if we're going to use that running back committee as much as we did last year, we need that offensive line to be solid. Mike McGlinchey's another year in. We've got the best tight end in the game for me, and I won't hear anything else. I don't care about your opinions. George Kittle is the best tight end. And I think that there's a lot of positives there. The problem with this is that the NFC has got a lot of talent, and the NFC's got a wider number of teams that can make a run at this. I think that's the challenge for the Niners. It's not that the Niners will be bad. It's that the competition the Niners are going to have to face to get to the Super Bowl is going to be substantially harder than the opposition that the Chiefs are going to have to face if they're going to get back.
Yeah, no,
I think that's fair.
I think John Lynch is quickly becoming one of my favorite kind of, executives, because he just doesn't really kind of mess about. They see something that they need to address and they address it. They don't wait and wait and wait. They're not really too fussed about value. And at the same time, when they realize that they can't pay stars, they get the correct compensation for it in relation to the Buckner trade. But they lost an offensive tackle. They brought in very, very good offensive tackle. They lost a defensive tackle. They drafted a defensive tackle in the first round. They lost a wide receiver. They drafted a first round wide receiver. That being said, their wide receiving core is pretty thin on experience. So whether or not they pick someone up going on later, I'm not quite sure. Kyle Shanahan is probably the best offensive coach that we've seen for a while. I think if Garoppolo hadn't lost that whole season, we might not have had such a huge rush and gush to fawn over Sean McVay and the Rams and what they did during that period. So if you had the choice between Shanahan and McVay, I would take Shanahan because he's been able to do what he's done with the 49ers everywhere that he's been. Falcons, Cleveland, Washington. And so he's shown that relative consistency. So I think the 49ers are there, but the Seahawks have got a real, I mean, it's a really, really, really good division. Such an interesting division. But the 49ers are going to be thereabouts.
I think the only thing which is going to hurt the 49ers this year is they have got the fourth hardest schedule in the NFL this year.
Okay, can we just throw that out the window?
Okay.
The strength of I understand in any ordinary year the strength of schedule may have some bearing. I think that this year the way that everyone's having to prepare, the turnaround, and the way that teams are, I'm not sure that you can rely on strength of schedule as a metric to be able to give an indication as to how well a team's going to do going forward. I have reservations about it in the first instance, but especially in this year, I'm not sure if it's something that we should really be too much weight on. You can do it all you want, but for me, it's just absolutely insane to try and think that in a year like this, you can try and take a metric like that and project it into a win total.
Well, you can look at the teams that they're going to face. They've got to play the Seahawks twice, Rams twice.
But that's not strength of schedule. That's their division.
Yeah, no. But then they've also got within that they've also got to play Green Bay, the Saints, the Patriots, the Eagles, and the Cowboys, as well as the Bills. So that's quite a few good teams.
Yeah,
I also think the Cardinals have gotten better.
Yeah, I think strength of schedule is an overblown metric in relation to that. I'm saying we're all good teams, but then we've got the same metric of teams that make the playoffs, half of them don't make them the year after. That's why the NFL is so good. Good teams are great one year, and the next year they fall off. We can project as much as we want, but the strength of schedule is something that irks me, as maybe you can tell by my reaction.
Yes, you're very sensitive about it. I do think that Jimmy G has got a lot of unfair criticism, because I'm just looking at his next gen stats that NFL put out, which is gives his ratings compared with the rest of the league and the distribution, and he's above average way more than he's than he's not. The only two areas that he's below the league average is throwing to his right behind the line of scrimmage and to his right over 10 yards. But over 20 yards to his right, he's one of the best in the NFL. It's some really weird things go on with Jimmy G. I think it's just because he's a good-looking guy. People hate him.
Well, we can look into who the actual receivers are getting into that deep right 20 yard area and the way that things are being schemed up by Shanahan. But I think we've got a little bit of kind of bias in relation to Jimmy Garoppolo, in that he came in, won 5 games out of 5, and was the next messiah, and the Patriots were ridiculous for letting him go. He then does his ACL, comes back, and the offense changes at that point. And it becomes far more run-orientated, inventive, motion-based. And so his role in that offense changed for the year that they went to the Super Bowl. And then he misses that wide-open shot. I'm sure Cameron will be able to tell me exactly when it was in the game, for potentially the leading to go ahead, and everyone just remembers that, and all of a sudden it's Jimmy G's fault. So I think we just have to be slightly careful when we kind of, say that Jimmy G was not great or not good. And I think, to say that he's above average is right. And I think if we can get him back to what he was doing in those first 5 games where he was heralded as the new coming, then the 49ers are going to be set for quite a long time. And the money that they've given him won't seem so bad through 3 seasons where he's got a positive win ratio and has gone to a Super Bowl.
For me, I still think Jimmy was robbed from the comeback player of the year last year. I think Tannehill rightly got most improved. To give Tannehill most improved and comeback felt like Tannehill had a good season, but let's be honest, they rode on Derrick Henry. They packed all 10 other members of the offense on Derrick Henry's back, and Derrick Henry could carry all 10 of them. Tannehill did well. Absolutely, I'm not taking that away from him at all. I think that Jimmy did enough to be a good quarterback. And I think that he is a good quarterback. What he needs to now do is show that he can be a great quarterback. And I think that this is these ifs, buts, and maybes. You go back to that last year and let's take Jimmy out and let's put a Deshaun Watson in there or something like that. The Niners, for me, would win the Super Bowl. I think that what Jimmy wasn't was the X factor edge, the sort of extra little bit that you needed to do to get over the line in those key moments. And I think that showed towards the end of the game when we were chasing it suddenly. Mahomes was in his groove and he was scoring for fun. And by that point, we didn't have the capability to go down the field. But at the same time, he did show he was able to do it because earlier in the season, we went to New Orleans and holy crap, what a game that was. And again, I come back to the best tight end in football and that massive play from Kittle at the end that drew the foul. And obviously on the podcast that the NFL Scotland one, Paul Mitchell, who's my co-host, is a big Saint fan. He's noising me up on Twitter. I thought the game's absolutely blown. There's no way we're coming back to it. And let me tell you, there was a lot of trash talk pointed in his direction that evening. It was magnificent. But, coming back around as well to the point that we keep discussing is the crowd's not being there is going to be massive. It's going to be in somewhere like the Superdome. That noise is unreal. I've never been in a sound like it. For that was just absolutely bouncing when I was over there in 2018. And actually, when we move on to talk Seattle, same thing. They've lost one of their X factors because that crowd, if it's not going to be there in its number, it's not going to have the same impact. The Chiefs, we kind of didn't really touch on that. We talked about how hard their games are on the road, but if they've lost their home field advantage because of the noise, that's a big factor in this as well. This is actually a really interesting one because let's sit down at the end of next year and let's see what impact it's had on the numbers, not having fans in the crowd when it comes to home field advantage. And let's see how much of a factor it actually is. So there's a conversation to be had in 6 months' time around that. But I've kind of waffled on and away from my point, which is ultimately that I think that Jimmy is a good enough quarterback to get us to the Super Bowl because he's done it. Is he a good enough quarterback to win a Super Bowl? He's got to prove that.
But then how much of that is on, Kyle Shanahan started to develop a reputation of kind of choking it in the big one as well. Like if you look at what happened in Atlanta and then again what happened here last year, so there's more pressure on them going into this year. They kind of have to step up, and I just think that division has gotten much better, and so it's going to be a big ask for them to get back to 13 wins. I don't think they're going to do it. Do they win the division? Possibly. Well, they might get into the playoffs as a wild card. I think that has to be a realistic expectation. I think that 49ers fans have to have there, that they may be a wild card this year, just because of how much better that division is. I think it's, we talked about this last week, Dan, the NFC North becoming like the old NFC East divisions where, a 9-7 team could win that division. You could possibly see the same kind of thing in the West.
Well, they've got history for that. I mean, teams have made the playoffs in the NFC West with losing records. So it's one of these things where the turnaround, the cyclical nature of the NFL comes back, and we've now got one of the strongest divisions that used to be a laughing stock. So what I would say is that if we move on to Seattle, it's the strange thing about the two offenses, the 49ers and Seattle, is that they're kind of similar, but yet Seattle relies a hell of a lot more on Russell Wilson and his execution than the 49ers would on Jimmy Garoppolo's execution.
Yeah, I think Russell Wilson's Also, one of the favourites to be MVP this year, 13-2.
Will he get a vote this year?
I think he will, because I think last year it was just Lamar Jackson was such a transcendent player. It was something that we had never seen before. I think this year Lamar comes back down to earth. I think the praise for Russell continues.
Okay, or Mr. whatever the hell his name is. It's Unlimited, that's it, Mr. Unlimited. Right, well, I'm going to have a bold prediction to ensure that Russell Wilson gets an MVP vote. I'm going to make a bold prediction to say that he gets a grand total of 0 MVP votes this year.
The old reverse jinx.
Well, I mean, am I wrong though? Am I wrong? We've got 8 years of Russell Wilson in the league, 0 MVP votes. I will say that that's going to continue, so it's guaranteed to change.
I mean, if you look at it, who they've got to play this year, and you know how strong we're saying this division is, how many MVPs do it on teams that are like 9-7? So, yeah, you've got a fair point. I think maybe his division might knock him out of it.
I think the talent on the roster, this is a similar thing, right? So I think Russell Wilson is the reason that the Seahawks do as well as they do. Definitely now, you know, obviously, let's go back to when they were winning the Super Bowl and when they had the Legion of Boom and all that stuff. The defense was massive, a massive contributor in that. People just didn't score. So Russell could get on the ball, do what he needed to do, and so be it. I think controversially, and it'll be a better 49er fan for saying so, I'm sure, but Russell Wilson is also the luckiest quarterback in the NFL. The amount of times that fortune favors the Seahawks is ridiculous. Now, you got to make your own luck, absolutely, and I'm not taking away from the fact that he is talent. He is absolute talent. And you see these plays from time to time. There's the Edelman catch in that Super Bowl that just, how did he manage to do it? But I almost feel like the Seahawks get one of those every single game. There's something happens that you're just like, how on earth have they just managed to do that? There'll be some play where Russell runs around for a good 15 seconds and just lobs it. And somehow their wide receiver manages to just get up high enough to catch it and somehow manages to toe tap as he's on his way out. And it's just some ridiculous play that you're like, there's no way that's scripted, right? That's so pinpoint that there's so many things have to land the right side up that's then into the realms of luckiness or fortune. And I think that's why they do so well. If you look at the talent on this team, it's the same thing. I don't think there's a lot of talent on this team. I know there'll be people who will disagree with me. They've gone and got Jamal Adams and they've paid a hefty price. I would have loved to see Jamal Adams at the Niners. I think that's the biggest area of concern. We didn't actually cover it, but I think the secondary is the problem in San Francisco. Jamal Adams would have been a great player to put into that, but I would not have paid what Seattle have paid for him. I think the premium's absolutely massive. And I think for Seattle, that's not the piece that's missing for them. I think the offensive line remains a major problem, and Russell is going to continue to have to run around. And he's got a young kid, and he's not going to be sleeping as well these days. And he's getting older, and people are going to start catching him. And when the defensive players in that division start catching him, all it's going to take is an Aaron Donald or a Nick Bosa, just a hit that's going to hit him and it's going to knock him sideways. And eventually he's going to run out of room. And I think that's where Russell Wilson starts to get into trouble. When he can't escape those defensive linemen that are coming down on him, that's when he's in trouble because he's not got the pieces around him to rely on. I think that Chris Carson is so broken. I think Carlos Hyde has proven that he's a decent running back without being anything exceptional. Rashad Penny hasn't really shown us anything he's capable of. So, you know, in Seattle, you need that backfield to be there. DK Metcalf's got a lot of upside, a lot of talent there. But second year, let's see what he's all about. Tyler Lockett is a player that deceives, you know, he starts to deceive his attributes, and I think that he's a great player. Beyond that, though, you know, who are the wide receivers? David Moore and Philip Dorsett. You know, I would rather have my inexperienced wide receivers in San Francisco than the wide receiver core that they've got in Seattle. And that's saying something. So I think that the problem there, like I say, remains the same as the Raiders. There's not enough talent there for them to be a natural contender. I think they are and will remain a contender, and it's because of Russell Wilson.
But I think scheme-wise, like what they've done is that Jamal Adams trade. You know, me and Dan talked about like the trade value and how Seattle maybe value that trade pick. That trade makes sense for them because realistically, what are they going to get in the draft that is comparable to Jamal Adams going forward. And Jamal Adams, where they're going to end up playing him is, he's going to be going up against Kittle. That will be the matchup. They're going to use him to neutralise him. And it kind of worked. They can move him out into the slot when it comes to playing against the Rams, because he's such a chess piece player. So I think to a team like the Seahawks, who have such a great defense, the value that they paid is totally justifiable for him. Scheme wise, I actually like DK Metcalf, because you need to know what he is. He's just a burner. He's just a guy who can run down the field really, really fast and outrun coverage. And that kind of works with the Seattle offense, which is primarily that, they like to use that run and then hit them with that play action. So it kind of works with what they're going for. Could they do with somebody better to, as a third option in the slot? Yes. But how many teams really have that stacked wide receiver core? I do think they're a great team. It's just I'm just struggling to see how they overcome San Francisco in the division. I just think this is such a good division. It's just going to be tight the whole way.
Yeah, we're skirting around what Seahawks Twitter has, basically a daily conversation about, and that's basically how Brian Schottenheimer gets production with the players that he's got. And there's just very, very little confidence that they can do it, but they always seem to manage it. They always seem to get, Will Disley getting the kind of production that they did from him at the tight end spot. Even Luke Wilson, when he's in there, production, touchdowns and such like. So it's one of these things. The defense is going to be top 5. I've no doubt about that. I'm not going to harp on about it. But certainly, they always seem to somehow get the production that they need just at the right time, as Cameron said. So we've picked 2 good divisions to talk about today, because certainly there's an interesting middle of the road kind of fight in the AFC West and in the NFC West. It's really, two heavyweights just now in the 49ers and the Seahawks that are going to battle it out. And I'm not going to say who's going to win the division. I don't think I can say who's going to win that division.
I think this division is way too close to call. I think this is the one division where we don't end up putting down where we think they're going to finish, just because it's going to be chaos. So next up is the Rams. A down year for them. They went, Sean McVay, the next coaching genius, got to the Super Bowl, getting like San Francisco last year, just weren't able to do it. And then they had that, the Super Bowl slump, as it's sometimes referred to, for the loser. Todd Gurley's moved on. They've lost a massive part in their offense in Blake Bortles not re-signing, who is my all-time favourite quarterback, and I really hope he signs somewhere. The boat, Blake Bortles, best of all time. A lot of questions for the Rams this year. How do we think they do? Obviously, they are featured on Hard Knocks as well, so we'll get a little bit of an insight into Sean McVay and as well sculptured beard. But where do we see these guys going? I
think it's going to be interesting to see essentially how their defense starts looking, given that they're moving away from Wade Phillips and they've got a relatively inexperienced coordinator taking the reins. So one thing I think we've got to say is that running back is a position that has no value to the analytics, but to Sean McVay it does. He's got production from not only Todd Gurley but the stable of backs, Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers is someone to really, really watch, and I'm going to have a cheeky punt and say that he's going to be the rookie offensive player of the year, or certainly be in the talk for that. I think he's going to get a lot of carries, and I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity to be a really, really explosive player that was hampered in college by a very, very bad offensive line at Florida State, and I think he was great value.
Okay, Cameron?
Yeah, for me, I think that the Rams continue to slide this year. I think that there's... Fine, Cam Akers could end up being a great running back, but I think that this is another team where you look at the players on the lineup, and I think that if you're setting up to tackle and deal with this offensive side of the football. You make sure that there's somebody following Cooper Kupp. And I'll be honest, at that point, forget about the rest of them. I don't think Goff's good enough to be a continuous threat if they can't get that running game going. If the running game gets going, fine. But because the Niners have been so strong in their running game, and because the Seahawks play quite heavily on their running game, in division, these defenses are set up to deal with the running game. You know, you go back to saying about Jamal Adams coming in to deal with George Kittle. Well, that's fine, because the Niners don't actually need to go through George Kittle to win. If you can use George Kittle to take Adams out of the game, fine. Run him off into the corner, create a great big hole, and let your running backs run through the middle without Adams being there to noise it up. You know, there's all of these offenses are set up to work in multiple ways. They're all dynamic. They're all multifaceted. They've all got a lot of talent and a lot of different options, apart from, I think, the Rams. And I think that the Rams are very limited in what they can do because the quarterback, I'm going to put a little asterisk next to Kyler Murray because he's got to prove it year 2. But in the rankings of quarterbacks, I think Goff's got a real chance at the end of the year of being 4th of 4. Looking at the wide receiver core, fine, it's actually decent. I think there's talent there, but there's not enough around it to allow them the separation that they need to do and allow the offense to pull in the linebackers to deal with the run game that gives the wide receivers the opportunity to create the space that they need to do. I just think there's just not enough there for defenses to struggle to cope with it. On the flip side of that, you know, new defensive coordinator, I think that obviously Aaron Donald is a monster, and I don't know if you guys have seen the photo of him doing the rounds on Twitter today, but Jesus Christ, he has put on about at least a stone in muscle by the looks of things. He's actually built in his own pads these days with his muscles around his neck. He doesn't need pads, it's just muscle there. The man is a monster. Jalen Ramsey, for me, is a talent, but he's an asshole. And I don't know whether or not that is something that a new defensive coordinator will be able to cope with. If things don't go well for the Rams, Jalen Ramsey is exactly the sort of player whose toys will be scattered across the field. And that'll be a problem on the defensive side of things, because when one of your best players is that much of a dick, then you need to tackle that. And if you're not tackling it, you're in trouble. So, you know, Ramsey's great if you're trending up. Ramsey's bad if you're trending down, because you just don't need that noise and that disruption.
He's already making noises about his contract. Saying he's not happy with it. So
but to be no. I'm not a Ramsey defender here, okay? But when he was traded, he said he wasn't going to ask for a new contract immediately as part of what these kind of double first-round pick trades seem to involve now. One of the deals is that we'll take the player, but as long as they don't have to do a new contract with him at the time of the trade. So, you know, he said he wasn't going to ask for that, and he didn't. Now he's asking for the contract. So I don't think anybody can come back and say that he's being an asshole about that. I mean, I've no doubt that he's a difficult character, you know, turning up in that kind of, you know, Humvee, you know, but prior to his last training camp with the Jaguars. So, no, this was the timeline for Jalen Ramsey to get his new contract. And if the Rams are being difficult about it, then that's on them. They are paying the price from an organizational standpoint for going all or nothing in relation to that year that they got the Super Bowl, giving away all their first picks, doing all that, you know, and then trying to get it again with the Ramsey pick. They had 4 draft picks, you know, before the draft started last year. They are paying the price for going all out for that Super Bowl season. And they're now having to pay people that they brought in to try and recreate that. So that's on the Rams. That's not on Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, that is fair. They have kind of sold out, and I'm just, my big concern is Jared Goff has gone back to his level, and I think that slump is going to continue. I think the first year Sean McVay worked wonders with him. You know, they obviously went to the Super Bowl with him, but I think last year Jared Goff showed you exactly who he is. What we saw with him when he was with Jeff Fisher, that is who he is. There's only so much you can do with scheme with a bad quarterback before eventually the league catches up to you and makes you rely on that bad quarterback. And it's something that I think we'll see with Tennessee and Tannehill. Tannehill is a good quarterback. They were able to out-scheme their opponent, their opponents. And I think this year, Los Angeles are going to continue that downward trend.
I think one thing I'm going to say is that I, to a certain extent, agree with you. But what I would say is that the Super Bowl year, they showed how good he was off of play action. The next year, they weren't able to rely on that as much because they didn't have a good ground game. And when they asked him just to do straight drop backs, he wasn't good. If he gets better at that aspect and isn't as one-dimensional, then that's how the Rams progress forward. So he's great off of play action, but of course to run play action effectively, you need a good ground game. So can he just, establish the run game with Cam Akers for Sean McVay, and can Goff be better at just straight drop back passing, and that will be the key for the Rams offense.
I just think we're now in he's going into year 5 now. Surely he is who he is in terms of that straight drop back passing. I just don't think I can't see him improving that much. I'm going to
give Goff the benefit of the doubt. The difficulty is that when Cameron said he'd be for the quarterbacks in the division, I couldn't really say no, and now I'm trying to come back and defend the guy. I think that when you have a year under Jeff Fisher and you're one of the worst rookie seasons probably in the last 20 years, and then you come back and you do what you do with Sean McVay, I think that there's always the potential for it to be there. But Jared Goff is not a player who can create his own destiny. Unfortunately, he's going to have to rely on McVay to do it for him, which is where Goff falls down for me. He needs someone else to be able to put the pieces in place for him. He can't make others better. He just has to be able to execute what's given to him, and that's probably the main difficulty with Goff.
I think I was going to say, I think the bookies agree, because if you look at the MVP odds for each quarterback in it, like Wilson's 13-2, as I said earlier, Murray's second favourite at 20-1, Jimmy G's third favourite at 33-1, and Jared Goff's sitting out there at 66-1. So I think, I don't see it in him. I think he's had that one good year, good for him. He got his money, he's got paid, he's set up for the rest of his life. But he is who we thought he was when he first came out.
Yeah, for me, I think that season was the perfect storm. And I think, to just recap on it as well, like Gurley was a monster, and defenses had to set up to tackle him. And that meant that there was extra space down the field that allowed Goff to throw the ball and not have an awful lot of double coverage to throw into or anything like that. Defenses were lining up to stop the run with the Rams, and if they didn't, then the Rams just ran the ball and they beat them. Goff had some great games that Monday night game against the Chiefs that was just straight mental. That was that year's game. Last year for me, it was the Niners Saints game that was like that. But Sean McVay was in charge of a team that were on their upward trend at that point. The problem that McVay's had is he's now had the Niners go on their upward trend, and now he's having to deal with the Cardinals going on their upward trend, all the same time as the Seahawks continue to just keep getting it done and have continually done so for years, while they don't necessarily have the talent to do so. So it's a hell of a hard division. It really is. I think that the NFC West, and to an extent now the NFC South, for me are the two divisions that are really tough, and all the top teams coming out of these divisions are capable, very, very capable. You look and touching slightly on the NFC South, but you look even at a team like the Panthers, and with a player like Christian McCaffrey, the Panthers are always capable of beating you because there's no bum teams in these divisions, and there isn't a bum team in this one. Jared Goff isn't a bum. He's not a bad quarterback. He's just not as good as the other ones in the division. The Rams aren't a bum team. They're just not as good as the others in the division. And I think that this is the ghost of Jeff Fisher will come back, and at best they'll get a 500 season, but probably 7-9.
Okay, let's transition on to the Cardinals. I'm really excited for the Cardinals this year, although, God, it fucking sucks that I have an idiot for a head coach and GM who decided to give up the best wide receiver in the NFL for a bag of fucking beans and the carcass of David Johnson, who can, fuck me, still hurt. But no, the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, I had doubts of coming out of college. You know, he's a little guy. We've broken it down in the game we did on the Cardinals, of all the issues that he has. But I think they're now starting to put the pieces around him. Larry Fitz is back for his 100th year, and he's not going to be asked to do too much. They relied heavily on crossing routes last year, but now adding in Hopkins, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, that is a good core. And obviously you also have Drake as well at running back. So I'm really excited for that offense, and I'm really excited to see how Cliff Kingsbury has evolved during this off season, and how the team progress.
To me, it's about their defense. If they can get better on defense, then the whole division's a crapshoot. And if they can win their home games against the division opponents, that'll be the main test, really, as far as I'm concerned. We've broken down Kyler Murray. Go back and have a listen if you haven't listened to that already. But it's really about their defense. They addressed that with the first round draft pick. But I still just struggle to see how they're going to get past the defenses of the 49ers and Seattle this year inside this division.
Yeah, that's a fair point. They do have games against Washington football team, Detroit, Carolina, Jets, Dolphins and Giants this year. So I think there is scope for improvement on their win record. But it is such a crowded and stacked division. It's tough to see this being the year where they really push for a playoff spot, or even to win the division or finish second. Cameron, what's your kind of thoughts? Sorry, DC, go on.
Yeah, go.
Just the teams that you mentioned there, other than Oakland play all of them, and they were the basis why I said that there's a possibility of getting those 8-9 wins. The difficulty is that who do I trust more? Do I trust the Raiders or the Cardinals more to beat those teams? And I think just now it's probably the Raiders. So the other difficulty is that I'm not very, very happy with Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator. I'm not quite sure why he gets the recognition he does. The gig straight away after the disastrous time at Denver. So I'm saying it's all on the Cardinals' defense, and if it continues the way it is, then it's going to cause more problems than the questions we have about the offense.
Cameron, your thoughts on Arizona?
Yeah, so I think there's a big bit here is clearly wide receiver core, they've got the best in the division. There's a conversation to say it's the best in the NFL. And I think that it's a solid conversation that you can have. This was the air raid approach that we were told was coming. And Kyler Murray's got an arm. Kenyon Drake is a good running back that I think they got for an absolute steal. And I think that because of the issues with David Johnson, that's a player that they've moved forward with. I think that the Cardinals make a lot of progress this year. I think their win record increases substantially. I think that Isaiah Simmons is an exciting player that they've got as well. That is a great pickup for them. There's some good picks out of the draft that cover a lot of places, predominantly a lot of them on the defensive side of things. And that's the area that they need to improve on. They need to get their defense up and running. Patrick Peterson still hanging about. Him and Larry Fitzgerald seem to be playing forever. Picking up Jordan Phillips was a good pickup for them as well. So there's a bit of progress here. I think that the biggest thing that they need, though, is year 2 progress from Kyler Murray, and that's going to be the major contributing factor to this, because you can have DeAndre Hopkins all you want, but he's going to be marked. He's going to be under double coverage. That Murray's going to be hassled. If Murray can improve his throwing while moving and follow the Russell Wilson school of how to be a quarterback in the NFC West, then the Cardinals are set up for massive success. Even if he can be 80% of the quarterback that Russell Wilson is, the Cardinals can do a lot with this lineup. But the question marks for me remain over him. He needs to take that step forward this year. And to your earlier point, under a new head coach that's inexperienced, that might be the thing that makes or breaks them. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they do it. They both take a step forward. Then the Cardinals will be pushing for second place in this division this year. If they don't make the step forward, I think they're at least third.
I think adding Josh Jones helps Kyler Murray, because there was a lot of games last year where he took the snap and then there was people on him straight away. I think if I'd be interested to see how they use Simmons. And let's not forget, they also have Chandler Jones, who's been an absolute beast at the end, or as a rusher the last couple of seasons, probably overlooked because he is playing on the Cardinals, and the record doesn't really do much for them. I think as we talked about on the Kingsbury episode, which again I highly encourage people to go back into our archives and listen. The good thing about Kingsbury is he's not married to his system. He's shown evolution. When he first came in, we thought this was going to be a pure air raid, and it was just going to be sling the ball like 50, 60 times a game, like maybe throw in one run, proper Mike Leach stuff. But he's evolved throughout the season, and he has taken on more NFL concepts. Kyler Murray, when you look at his breakdown, he actually feasted a lot of times on the kind of crossing routes and the mesh concepts. It seemed to be when you look at the passing chart breakdown. I'm hoping that, I think that was possibly just because of the wide receivers that they had. He didn't really have a deep outside threat, but adding Hopkins into that really does help now. I just hope that he doesn't rely on Hopkins like Deshaun Watson had a tendency to. Deshaun Watson had a tendency to lock into Hopkins, and then he would just get very lazy with his eyes, and then eventually come down when he went to his check down. He was late getting to the check down, and he was missing a lot of those easy check down release throws because he was so locked in on Hopkins. But I think because you've got Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, there's a good chance that you can distribute the ball more evenly with those guys. And Larry Fitzgerald's a good veteran leader, whereas in Houston you just had Will Fuller, who was in the treatment table, nursing his hamstring yet again after week 2. I'm excited. I'm excited for this Arizona team, but I don't think this is the year where they push on. I think it's next year where we really see them.
One thing I would say about your comment there about Hopkins and being a deep threat, to me that's not what they are. And looking at the Arizona roster, Christian Kirk is probably who you're looking to be that deep threat. Maybe Andy Isabella from the slot. Probably more Christian Kirk, though, to me, given that Larry Fitzgerald's, not on the Zimmer frame, but he's not as fast as he used to be either. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get that kind of, deep, that deep stretch compared to, other teams that might want to be using the arm of Kyler Murray a different way, because he's got that power, he's got that arm strength to get down the field. But at the moment, Hopkins isn't a deep threat. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not great around 15 yards, but it's mostly on in-breaking routes and out-breaking routes around that time. So it's really going to be able to see how are they going to push the ball down the field, and who's going to be the player that goes down the field for that. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how these guys do and how they do use them. I mean, Houston did use them a lot on those deep crossing ins, and they did use them down the sideline, but they were expecting them to catch it early and just get yards after catch. So I think the analytics term is contested catch. He's a contested catch guy. Or it's because you've got nobody else, and so you're just going to chuck it up to your other option is Kenny Stills. Okay, we're just going to have to address your Bill O'Brien kind of one game plan, one dimension. Deshaun go win as the game kind of difficulty. We'll get onto that eventually, but it's quite clearly the subtext when you keep talking about the Texans. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate there just now.
On that one, just before you move on our episode of the NFL Scotland podcast this week, we were looking at the AFC South. We've actually got a Texans fan, Ewan Distakwa, who's come on our pod a couple of times. He's coming on to defend the trade. So I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's told us already he's coming on to defend the trade. I'm fascinated to see how he's going to do it, because I am struggling to see any upside on that. Other than Hopkins wanted paid and the Texans didn't want to pay him, that's the only thing, because there's nothing else about that trade that makes sense to me.
Make sure that he has his video on, because you'll see Bill O'Brien with a gun pointed to his head as he speaks it. It's just absolutely ridiculous. If DeAndre Hopkins wants paid, you load up the car and then you just go, here's your money. Because, yeah, right, I'll save it for our our AFC South preview episode, because there's a lot of anger, and Dave will probably be feasting on my anger as a Jags fan. It will keep him warm. So I think this division is such a competitive one. It's so hard for us to even project where this is going to end up. The only thing I would be semi-confident putting my neck out for is I think the Rams might finish bottom of the division. I don't know about the rest of you guys.
It's the only thing I am safe on as well. For me, I think the Rams finish bottom. And I think that the other three, there is a chance the Cardinals can win this division. There is a chance. I don't think there's a chance the Rams win it. I don't see that scenario, but I can see any one of the other three doing it. I am a negative fan that always expects the worst, so I won't be predicting the Niners to win. For me, I think it's Seattle. I think that Seattle just won't go away. They just will not go away, and as long as Russell Wilson's there, they are a contender. I think that, coming back to the point we've touched on a few times now, is interesting to see how the home field advantage isn't a thing if there's no fans in Seattle. So can they do it when the opposition aren't getting deafened at the same time? We'll see. Still think they win the division. It's between the Niners and the Cardinals for second and third. I think it will be close. I don't think any team wins more than 10 in this division, and I don't think any team has less than 6 wins in this division. But I've got Seattle, San Francisco, Cardinals, and Rams.
Okay, yeah. DC?
Seattle to win it, over 9 wins, and that's about all I'm going to say.
Fair. We'll keep our bold predictions for the other divisions. Well, that wraps it up for us this week. Make sure you check out Cameron on the NFL Scotland podcast. You might even hear Bill O'Brien in the background as they try and justify that trade. And Cameron, you've also got a exciting deal with Stuart Brewing.
Yes. So if anyone is familiar, many people may have come along or heard about it, but many folk may not have. We do, and have done the last couple of years, a week 1 live event in Edinburgh to kick off the NFL season. The reason for this is, the purpose of the podcast was always to try and get the Scottish NFL community together, get a bunch of people in a pub, watch the games together, because the atmosphere is always brilliant. We found a pub to do it, and it's been great the last couple of years. This year, because of COVID, it just ain't happening. There's no way we can fill a pub full of people and have that atmosphere, and we want to try and include as many people as possible. So we're doing an online event. We're doing a Scottish NFL preview show that will take place on Sunday before all the TV coverage starts. And it's just an opportunity to get some fans together, do some competitions, have some giveaways, talk football. We've got some interesting content. We've been working with the Wolves on a couple of things. We've got other things up our sleeves as well. So, folk can tune in for that. But as part of that, we're doing a party pack with Stuart Brewing. So if you just search for NFL Scotland party pack or NFL Scotland Stuart Brewing, put that into Google, look us up on Twitter at Scotland NFL, any of that, you should be able to find a link to these party packs. We've picked 6 beers. See what we did there? We picked 6 beers.
Nice.
We've also got an NFL Scotland schooner glass, and I'm really pleased with the quality of these things. Really pleased. So that it's got our logo on it. We've also got a little hot sauce in there as well. And by being part of this, there's a bunch of competitions. So we've been donated a prize of a Jacksonville Jags on-field kit, actually worn by one of the flag bearers at Wembley, but it's been signed by Dede Westbrook. So it's a real high-quality jersey. Like, it's one of these $200 ones. It's got Jaguars and 1 on the back rather than a player name, but it's signed by Dede Westbrook. It's a really unique item, so that's going to be a top prize. The only way you can have a chance of winning that is to buy a party pack. So everybody that buys a party pack will go into a draw. These are limited number as well. We've got a set number, and when they sell out, they sell out. We're well over halfway there as well. So not a lot of time left to snap these up, and they've been going fast, which is great. And then on the day, we're going to have a bit of a party together. We're just going to do online, sit down, have a beer together, have a blather, and then sit back and watch all the football. Can't wait.
Perfect. I'll put a link to the party pack in the show description. So as you're listening to this, you should be able to click onto it and get yourself one. I've got mine. I'm really excited for the glass, and possibly the beers as well.
Can I ask Cameron a really important question? One that I'm sure everyone really, really needs to know an answer to, because I've been struggling with myself. Cameron, do you have a surname for a first name, or do I have a first name for a surname?
Because we're in Scotland, you've got a first name for a surname. I'm going to go with that.
Nonsense. Right, nonsense. Right, we're going to do this. Right, no, nonsense. You know?
Actually, I think that immediately makes me middle class.
Cameron Clan.
I've got a surname for a first name. I'll take that. You know, if I can take the house and the lifestyle that goes with it, I can live with a double surname name. That's fine.
Yeah, well, I look forward to finding out what the Hobbs clan tartan is. Anyway, moving on.
Another announcement for us this Sunday, I will be doing a live stream on Facebook with Gridiron Hubs, where we will be rewatching the Patriots versus Eagles Super Bowl, the Philly special, and that's just really to try and get everybody back into the mode of watching the NFL again. That will be on Sunday at 8 p.m. Check it out on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. And my guest will be Martin Harrison from the Edinburgh Wolves. So we'll both be watching that. He's a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, so that should be a lot of fun. Is there anything else before we close off here, Dan?
No, I thought the silence was acquiescence.
Well, that's perfect. Right, well, thanks, Cameron. Make sure you get one of those party packs. Check out the NFL Scotland podcast, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.